Hey y'all, Flipper Fred here. Thanks so much for joining me today as we are going to take a look at the SPY Bodacious. This is not the real one, of course. This is a knockoff. I got this one from Temu. However, as we will discover in a minute, it's basically identical to the same one you can get on OK Knives, probably the same one on Wish and anywhere else that you go and find it as well. Before I get too deep into all this, if y'all would do me the kindness of just down below here, hit that subscribe button and even maybe give me a thumbs up in advance. It doesn't mean much for y'all, but it really means a lot for us little guys on the YouTubes, so thanks so much for doing that. All right, let's take a quick peek at the box this thing came in. This is the standard fare Chinese knockoff Spyderco box. It is unlabeled. I had to literally write it on there myself to say this, which one it is, so I can try to keep my boxes straight. Standard fare, you've probably seen these a million times if you've looked at other knockoffs. I think they just keep a stack of these around. Nothing really comes in the box other than, of course, the plastic wrapper it came in. And this one, Education. Typically, this is supposed to be about the model that you received, which would in this case be the Bodacious. However, this one is all about the Thai military model. And I've seen this actually now with probably half a dozen different knockoff Spydercos. So I think this is like just the standard brochure that they have, and they stick it in all the boxes. They get a big stack of these boxes on the shelves, and no matter what knife you buy, they pull this box with that brochure off the shelf, drop the knife into it, and away it goes into the mail. So standard fare there. If y'all haven't watched my videos before, I do think it's a terrible thing that the Chinese are allowed to knock off these beautiful brands and styles that have been done. And I know I always get, all the people, the haters, and I totally am with you that say, why do you even promote it? Why do you talk about it? Why do you show it? All you're doing is encouraging people to buy the knockoffs. I don't really entirely believe that to be true, as basically if you're only willing to spend 25 bucks on a Bodacious, you're probably not inclined to pay the $262 that the real one costs. However, there are some exceptions to that. I have discovered I never was a Spyderco fan before I bought several of these knockoffs. And now after having a few of them, there's actually several that I would buy. I always thought these were a little bit weird. This one maybe less so than most. But there's, you got to admit, a lot of the Spydercos are a little weird looking, and I never even considered buying a real one. But these days, I actually have a couple on my list that I'm going to try to ask for presents or whatnot. But I'm just on a strange journey right now. Yes, I know there are knives for $25 that are fantastic, that are not knockoffs. Thank you very much for putting that in the comments 100 million times. Been there, done that. I got those knives. Those are awesome knives. You are absolutely correct. There are fantastic knives under $50 that are not knockoffs in any way. They're original designs. They are beautiful, and I love them. I'm just on a knockoff phase of life right now, and that's what I'm doing. So that's why I'm here. There's people who seem to be interested in these things like I am, so I'm just sharing my experience with you. All right, so before we go too much further, let's just go ahead and knock the specs out on these things. I'll pull them up on the left side of the screen. You can see this knife in many, many ways does, in fact, match very closely with the original. Mine comes in right at 8 1/4 inches long total length, and I just can't get that extra 0.02 inches, so I had to report it as two 1/100ths different. But the blade length is the same. The close length is the same. Here's where we come into a major difference, is the blade thickness. So the blade thickness on this thing is supposed to be 0.125, and I get this 150 all day long. It doesn't matter how or where I measure that thing, it is 150. So that's a major difference. However, I got to tell you, I don't mind that. This knife to me, and I'll give you a spoiler alert, I like this knife, but there's a ton of differences between this and the actual real one, the blade being not one of the least, actually. But I love this knife. This is a big, beefy beater, workhorse, pry bar of a knife for 25 bucks in D2 steel that I don't care if it gets broken, chipped, or what have you. I am going to get my money's worth out of this blade, right? The handle thickness is not reported anywhere that I can find online for the original one, so just in case you're curious, this comes in at just over a 1/2 inch wide. Does not at all feel big in the hand or oversized in any way. It feels very comfortable. It's a well-designed knife. My glove size is just a large, right at a large. A medium is just a hair too small for me, so if that gives you any cents, then there you go. The blade finish matches with the satin. It is an almost full flat grind, but that's the same with the original too. You can see right here that line is where it's not quite ground all the way above that point. No big deal there. The blade is going to be the biggest difference. Of course, this thing is trying to tell us that it's made out of S30V, but nobody believes that, do you? It is a D2. So I talked to the people at OK Knives and I said, hey, what are you using for the steel on these knives? I'm just curious. I'm going to buy it anyhow. And they responded to me. They said, we're using D2 steel on those Spydercos. So I'll tell you what, a big beefy block of D2 steel works out just A-OK with me. You can see the weight on this bad boy comes in a little bit decent amount heavier than the original one, 4.93 versus 4.8 ounces. It is definitely not oversized. I mean, it's a full-size knife. We'll look at some size comparisons in a minute. You know, you won't forget you have it in your pocket, but it's not going to weigh you down. I probably wouldn't wear this with a light pair of running shorts or anything, but I don't want this knife if I'm going out running. This is not the one I'm going to carry. You know, this is jeans and work pants. That's a heavy-duty sucker. And really, the difference in the weight is going to be because that blade is so much thicker than the original. The price, you can see, the real one goes about $262, multiple spots around the internets that I could find. I got mine for $25.49, and that is a bargain. I will take that all day long. I did measure the inside blade edge. A lot of people like to know that because this is such a beefy knife. I don't often look at that, but mine came in at about 0.027 back here near the back of the blade. And as we get towards the tip, it widens out just a little bit out here to about a 0.029. For reference, a really good thin slicey blade be about 0.018. So this thing is considerably thicker. However, I'll show you how it cuts in just a minute. All right, let's talk about some of the other major differences between this and the other real one. Before we do that, let's talk about some size comparisons. I'm sorry, I should have done that first. Let's jump into that. The obvious comparison here is going to be with the Spyderco Shaman. I mean, these are basically two of the same knives. The Spyderco Shaman, however, has this forward choke-up choil, which everybody loves, including me. The handles are much more rounded on the Shaman, which is a beautiful thing, makes this even more comfortable to hold than the Bodacious. However, the Bodacious is knocked down. There's a little bit of a radius or a chamfer around these edges, so they're not sharp. Like I said, it's very comfortable to hold. Even the pocket clip isn't really unbearable in any way. I've done some gripping and cutting with it. But these are your obvious comparisons. The difference is the blade length. So if you put the blade lengths side by side, let's see if I can line those two up. You can see how much longer the blade on the Bodacious is, and that's because so much of the Shaman's blade is taken up with this forward finger choil. So what you're doing basically is you're giving up the forward finger choil, which I do love, and this Shaman is very comfortable to use in that position, and instead you just choke up to here. Now you get a longer blade, but the overall knife is the exact same length for all intents and purposes. So Shaman is nice. I'll tell you the other thing I like between this and the Shaman. If you've got a Shaman or have flipped one, you will know that this nub right here at the front of that finger choil, when it swings around, it comes back up through here. It's going to be hard to see into this compression lock. You can see that little nubbin right there. So every time this thing closes, if you don't move your finger out of the way, that point hits you in the finger. And the first few times you do it, man, it gets a little disconcerting. As to what the hell just happened. Did I just get cut? And no, it's just that little nub right there, the finger guard, and it swings all the way back up. So what you have to do is let off on that locking time. But again, this is not about the Shaman. What if you don't have a Shaman? How about the good old PM2 or the Para 3? I'll try to keep those about lined up on the pivots. You can see this is very similar in overall length. However, it's definitely a beefier blade than the PM2. It's actually a little bit longer, I believe, just a hair longer than the PM2. Para 3 obviously is going to be much shorter. This is not a micro-sized blade. What if you're a good old Benchmade guy? Well, how about the Crooked River or a Bug Out? That'll give you a sense. The Crooked River, this is obviously the full-size edition, is larger. So that's a bigger knife. Doesn't necessarily feel like a bigger knife. In some ways it does, and some it doesn't. Good knife. I have another review on that coming out. But anyhow, there's your size comparison there. One last one that's an oddball, but a lot of people may be making a decision right now as to should I go with the Manix 2 or the Bodacious. That's a tough call. You're going to have the same issue where you have the forward choil to choke up, so you get a lot more blade. The difference also in sliciness is going to be apparent. You can see the Bodacious blade is much thicker, even though mine is thicker than it's supposed to be. You get a definite beefier blade with the Bodacious. So for me, but the weight difference is huge. I mean, these are nice, they're light, they're grippy. You know, this is one I carry out as an EDC knife all day long. It's light, it's easy on the pocket, easy to get in and out. I love that knife. And this is going to be, again, this is your work knife. This is one you put in your, you know, your jeans, your Carhartts, and you go do some heavy duty work with this. This is a giant sharp pry bar, in my opinion. Let's talk about how this thing differs from the original. There's some really strange things going on with this knife, all right? So first of all, it has a fantastic detent. That's not necessarily different than the original. I just thought it was worth pointing out, like the breakaway it takes. This is probably the strongest detent on any Spyderco that I have. It's almost impossible to fail it. It's not so much that it's not easy to flip. Obviously, you can flip it all day long, any way you want. Front side, back side, all different. It's going to pop out, pop into place every time. You can see it drops shut, basically. We're going to take a look inside this thing in just a minute. And the reason it drops shut and the action is so incredibly smooth on this thing is they got washers in this thing. Well, you shouldn't have washers in here. At least the original doesn't have, sorry, my bad, bearings. This thing runs on bearings, whereas the original has the bronze phosphor washers in it. So that's an interesting choice, a little departure. The other thing, which may be a little difficult to see here, is the texture. So the real Bodacious has no real texture. It's very smooth. It's a little something they did different on the Bodacious than other models. Is this has a nice micro, kind of what you almost call micro milling or micro texture in the G10. Just really kind of normal standard G10 with a little grippiness to it. And the real Bodacious does not have that in it. So I like that. That's one of the things, you know, I like the thicker blade because I got plenty of thin slicey blades, and I like the textured G10 that doesn't exist on the original. So far we're batting 1,000 on the differences. All T8 hardware, except for the pocket clip. So I like that. However, the real one has a T10 up here on the pivot screw. So that's a little different. So we have bearings, we have texture versus no texture, we have a T8 versus a T10. One of the things we'll see when we get inside here is there are no skeletonized liners on this one. So the real model is fully skeletonized. The steel liners, there are nested steel liners inside here. Hopefully you can see a little bit of that, and you can clearly see these are not skeletonized at all. That also probably contributes a little bit to the weight. They could have skeletonized them. This G10 is plenty thick and plenty hard. But let's talk about some really weird things. Like, how about no backspacer? Did any of y'all pick that up yet? There's no backspacer on this knife. There should be a backspacer right here, basically. It's the exact same as they did on the Shaman. You can see where the backspacer starts. Should be exactly like that. Here's another, just like the Shaman, it is supposed to have jimping right here on the compression lock. And as you can see, there's no jimping at all on the compression lock. How about on the blade? As you can see on the Shaman, there's jimping on the top of the blade. There's supposed to be jimping on the Bodacious blade. Not a fan of that. I do wish that that the Bodacious did have that jimping. I think that would certainly be helpful. I don't care so much about it on the compression lock, but you know, that's a pretty major difference. When you've left off the jimping on the compression lock and the back of the blade, that's a big deal. The other thing you'll find is the stop pin here. I was worried about this at first, but it looks like it's a normal size stop pin. However, just the piece that protrudes through the scales here, it looks very tiny. So I was worried, gosh, did they put in an undersized stop pin on this thing? It doesn't appear that they did. I think that the stop pin is fine, but the little studs that you see through here, if you saw this side by side with the real Bodacious, you would definitely see the difference in that as well. All right, so I don't think I actually need to take it apart. If y'all want me to take it apart, I'll do it in another video, maybe with a cut test or something. You can see the liners are not skeletonized, and you'll have to just take my word. It's the cheap kind of brass bearings with the open face with little steel balls in it. So, you know, about as cheap as you can get on the bearings that are in there. You might be able to peek at it right here at this angle. It's hard to tell. But yeah, there you go. You can see there's bearings in there. Interesting choice. I'm glad they did it. Again, like the heavier blade, that works to my benefit. at least, because the action on it is really smooth. All right, final thing. How about cutting with this thing? So we bought a nice $25 knife, but let's see how it works. Before I do, let me tell you, this thing came as dull as a butter knife, maybe worse. It would not cut paper. Part of it's because it's just such a big, beefy blade. I think whoever, built it and cut it and sharpened it just didn't either take the time or didn't care about it. So I did put it on a strop. So in all fairness, I wanted to show you whether or not this thing could even be made to cut with such a big, fat, beefy blade. And I think you'll see the answer is pretty good. I'm going to try to go slow with this just so that you can see that it's smooth all the way, almost from start to finish. Of course, that was probably cutter error there. So will it cut? This thing will cut as good as I need it to. I have put it through some minor cardboard tests just to check it out for myself after I stropped it up a little bit. Just a couple of cuts just to make sure it worked well. As you can see, it cuts paper. Yeehaw for that. How about it? So I think I'm going to leave it with that. I don't want this thing to go on and on. Again, my overall impression is I'm really glad I got this thing. As much as I hate and don't ever really want to recommend, Chinese knockoff knives, what a terrible thing. It's just too good. For $25, it's hard to go wrong. It's good, solid, textured G10 with steel liners in there. It's extra beefy blade. It's a D2 steel. It's able to be sharpened. You guys know what D2 is. I'm sure they don't harden this thing to the same, hardness that the good manufacturers do, but it sharpens up like you just saw. It will cut plenty. It's just a big, heavy work knife that I don't mind abusing. I hate to recommend it in any way, shape, or form, but I know a lot of other people are kind of on the same kick and looking at it and wondering, well, should I get that? Should I get the Shaman? I don't know that I would get both necessarily, but geez, for the price, $25 each, you can get both and try. Why not? Ooh, that was dueling blades right there. Both good blades, both have their own purposes and uses. This is my heavy-duty beater. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of information. Again, if you would, take a second right down below here, hit that subscribe button. If you've watched this long, do one final act of kindness for your buddy Fred here. Means a lot to me. Give me a little thumbs up. Helps us little guys on the YouTube, and I sure do appreciate that. Otherwise, we'll see you soon on the next video. Y'all have a great day.